Hello Bishes, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing another draw with me and I'm just gonna get straight into it. No BS intros attached whatsoever. Just like the spread I did last week, we're gonna continue to just work from the middle of my sketchbook because just a little recap, the reason why I like to start from the middle is because it relieves you from that pressure of starting on the first page and feeling like you need to make this beautiful cover page, whereas I feel like once you adjust to drawing on a few pages in the middle of the sketchbook, you're kind of like, whatever at this point, my sketchbook is what it is, and by the time that you draw on that first page, you're just gonna approach it in a more natural way instead of just feeling like you need to force yourself to make it impressive or something like that. So the theme for today's video is kind of gonna be around my childhood or growing up as an Asian American kid in my grandparents' home, because thinking back to my childhood, a lot of it really rooted back to the house of my grandparents. And anyway, I'm gonna keep the sad part super short and simple, but none of my grandparents are around anymore. They all pretty much passed away throughout my childhood to teenage years, and I haven't been in their homes in about almost over 10 years. And one of my fears is kind of just forgetting what their home was like, considering that that was honestly where I really grew up. Like, yes, I do love and will always remember my parents' home when I was a kid, but my grandparents' home, however, has such a different special place in my heart. Like, if I were to be a video game character and every time you die and you restart your life, like, how you're in a specific location, I would always just restart it from like sleeping on my grandparents' couch and just waking up to the smell of your grandmother cooking congee in the kitchen while the Hong Kong radio is playing on in the background, and next to you, your grandpa sitting on the other couch, hearing the rustling of those newspaper pages turning as he flips each page. So yeah, that was kind of like a standard morning of me waking up in my grandparents' home. I spent a lot of my time in my childhood at their house because whenever I went to school, my parents would be busy at work after school, so pretty much after school all the time I would go to their house and I wouldn't be able to go home to my parents' house until it was like 9 p.m. So really I felt like I went back to my actual house most of the time just to sleep and wake up, go to school, and then I would spend the rest of the afternoons and evenings in my grandparents' home. I'll never forget the day that my grandpa moved out of his house, because by that time my grandma already passed away, so it was just really him living in that house, and he was going to move to live with my aunt because he was also starting to get very weak and sick as well, so she had to watch over him. But I'll never forget the day that they officially moved out of that house, because I felt like it was like a goodbye to my childhood officially. And during that time in life, I also did not have a phone. I did not have any smartphones or any cameras to take photos of my grandparents' place. Of course, my parents have photos sitting at home in photo albums of their house, but first of all, I don't live with my parents anymore since I moved to California, and second, I just really wanted to be able to draw a very clear layout of what I remember from their home before I forget it. I've always wanted to do this, but I always set it aside, probably because it was kind of too much of an emotional thing for me, but I feel like now I'm kind of more ready to just remember and feel those emotions. So I just decided that I'm just gonna draw literally from memory what I remembered the layout of their house looked like if I were to enter from the front door right now. So upon first impression, a lot of people normally guess that I am either Korean, Japanese, or Vietnamese, and for some reason Chinese is always like last, because my last name apparently is also a Vietnamese last name, Lam, but my family is actually originally from Hong Kong, so we are Chinese Americans who speak Cantonese, and apparently, according to my 23andMe, I also have like 5% Vietnamese and according to 23andMe, my family back in the 1800s were all Vietnamese. So that's something interesting that I learned recently, but I did not grow up with any Vietnamese traditions or the language in the household at all. I really only spoke Cantonese with my family, in which I feel like a lot of people who have just recently gotten to know me or only know of me through my videos and social media, they would be a little bit shocked to know that English was not my first language and it was actually Cantonese that I mostly spoke up until I was probably like 12 or 13. And the reason why I mostly spoke Cantonese was just simply because when I spent a lot of time around my grandparents, that was the only language I really spoke because they did not really understand English. And when I'm around my parents, I mostly speak English, but my parents normally kind of have a mix of Cantonese and English being spoken to me, and eventually it kind of just evolved to mainly English. My parents also came to the United States when they were very young. They were around like 6 to 14 years old. So it was really my grandparents who brought us all here, and which I am forever grateful and thankful for. So because my parents mostly grew up in America, they definitely adopted more Western and American values and perspectives compared to my grandparents, and that's why I felt like whenever I switched between the houses of my grandparents and my parents, it was kind of like a shift in culture, whereas my grandparents' home made me feel like it was very Chinese, made me feel like I was in Hong Kong or somewhere that was not America. But then when I went to my parents' house, or my actual house, I felt like I was just in the United States. So that's kind of where my Asian American identity kind of roots from. Also, just talking about my drawing right now, I am using a Muji pen to line art the sketches, whereas I'm using the, once again, extinct Utrecht colored pencils to just shade it in lightly, because I feel like this style really gives it a very nostalgic or storytelling type of feeling, where they're just rough, imaginative sketches that hold a bit of reality because it is based on reality, but they are being drawn from my imagination. So I feel like giving that softness of the colored pencils to contrast with the sketchiness of the bold pen lines, it really gives that whole like, yes, this is a memory type of vibe. But yeah, other than just drawing in my sketchbook, making videos, and working on my comics during this quarantine, I've also been trying to pick back up on my languages again. I've been trying to pick back up on learning Cantonese because it's been a while since I've been consistently speaking Cantonese in a real life setting, because I mean, it's been a while since I've last spoken to my grandparents. Don't know when I will talk to them again, but also my parents don't live with me, so it's not like I can really just talk to them randomly out of the blue unless if I call them. And of course, even speaking with my parents, I still have moments where not just me, but my parents also just revert back to speaking English, because out of habit, English is just the more common language spoken between us. I feel like it's especially hard when you just don't really even remember that much Cantonese to begin with. So when you come across words that you don't even remember or know how to say, you just naturally revert back to English to get your point across, because it's like sometimes you're just at Panera Bread with your family and you want to tell your mom you want to order the green goddess salad, but you're just like, I want to order the Luxic goddess salad. And thus is the birth of Chinglish. If you grew up as an Asian American kid, I am pretty sure you are familiar with these shrimp crackers that you just cannot escape in any Asian grocery store that you go to, especially in the United States. Back then, I didn't even realize that they were Korean, so also I have no idea how to write or speak in Korean, so forgive me if I fucked up on this drawing and the spelling of it, but in general, my grandparents always had an assortment of various Asian snacks in their house, because Asian supermarkets kind of just had all the different Asian countries snacks just compiled into them. So yeah, aside from that, my grandma also always made this super wholesome congee or rice porridge. I don't really like the word rice porridge because it makes me sound like I'm just back in the good old days or something like that. But in Cantonese, it's called juk, and it really made me feel comforted. It made me feel loved. You might have seen a comic where I talked about how there's a certain type of food that I really like called my grandma loves me food, because anytime I have something that feels super wholesome, brothy, or comforting, it reminds me of the stuff my grandma made, because it's stuff that you can eat and like relieve a headache or relieve nausea or just relieve a bad feeling inside of you. And I feel like because I'm someone who's always like on the edge of things in my mind, this type of food really soothes my soul. So I am still struggling to find a congee place near me in Los Angeles that is really good. I kind of live a bit far away from the Asian communities, so I kind of just have to deal with waiting until I'm in the area or just wait till I go back to New York and have my mom cook me something. So one of the questions I usually get asked by my other Asian American viewers is, how did I deal with wanting to be an animator or artist when I have Asian parents? Because there's that stereotype out there where Asian parents are always telling their kids to be like, oh, you should be a doctor, a lawyer, or someone in a notable field that requires years and years of school and whatnot. And it's interesting because I never really felt like my parents were the stereotypical Asian parents that I hear about. Like, yes, my parents definitely disciplined me and my sister, but at the same time, I never felt like it went to the extremity of driving us crazy as kids to the point that we would lose parts of our childhood. And for that, I am thankful for them as my parents. But again, at the end of the day, everyone is raised differently. Another huge part of it, I believe, is because my parents mainly grew up in America starting from their youth. So I feel like they really had a lot more westernized values that kind of softened that really strict Asian part of them. Like, again, it's not like they don't have any of that discipline side. They did and they do, but it's just not to the extremity of other stories I've heard. So when it came to the whole art and animation thing as potentially being my career, it's not like they told me to not do it. They definitely encouraged me to keep drawing, but they also wanted me to keep my eyes out for other potential things out there in life. Like, yes, they ended up actually making me take piano and made my sister take violin. They put us in swimming classes and put us in a lot of other random classes that I wasn't really interested in, but I appreciate the fact that they were trying to broaden my horizons without really forcing me into them. So at the end of the day, it kind of just feels like it was a compromise where my parents were still like pushing us to work hard and be disciplined and stay committed and focused to something. But in terms of what it is we were committed to doing or working on, they were kind of just like, whatever, it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as what you're doing is something that you care about and you're willing to work hard in it, which I feel like I am very lucky to have had parents like that. Also, I've been meaning to make this note, but I just got too passionate in my talks. But if you're wondering what those random ass yellow looking rocks are, they are a rock sugar that my grandma used to give me as a candy type of snack, and it literally looks nothing like it. I am sorry I didn't do it justice, but also to be fair, I feel like the actual look of this rock sugar, which is just kind of yellow, it just doesn't really look that appealing in real life either. It just looks like a yellow crystal. But I don't know, I guess in this drawing I decided to make it look like some psychic levitating rocks in the air, which kind of makes it more epic, I guess. So on the bottom right corner, I'm just pretty much doodling my cousins and I, because the four of us would always stay at my grandparents' place whenever we were done with school. So they were pretty much my friends and my crew back then when we were at the ripe age of like 8 or something like that. And we would always go with my grandma to go to the deli so that she could pick up a lottery ticket to play lotto. So that's why I'm about to doodle a whole lotto ticket thing, because again, this is just a compilation of the small nuances of my childhood. Another huge part of my childhood was pretty much whenever I played with my cousins. We were kind of like reenacting cartoons or animated TV shows when we were little. Like, we would watch The Land Before Time, or we would watch Caillou or Totally Spies, or just a lot of these random cartoons that would show on TV, and we would pretend to be the characters and play as them individually. And in a way, it was like playing fan fiction in real life. So I would want to then recreate what we just role played and draw them out into books or on a Magnadoodle. So that's really a lot of where I feel like my roots to being interested in animation and storytelling with art came from. Like, I always knew that I liked drawing in general, but for some reason I could never draw things that didn't have like a story or a meaning behind it. Like, I used to struggle to just draw a girl just standing there and smiling with no meaning. Like, I didn't understand that stuff as much. Now obviously I can do that, but back then I was just like, what is the purpose of drawing this? Also, another favorite of mine growing up was Bambi. I was so fucking obsessed with Bambi. That is why I actually love deer, and that's why there are deer on my cover for the sketchbook. But I used to just make my grandpa borrow the Bambi VHS from the library, and we always attempted to try to make another VHS copy of it just so that I could have one to keep, because back then there was no Netflix, so I couldn't just watch it on my own, and back then my parents and grandparents just didn't want to buy it. Anyway, I feel like I could go on and on about talking about my childhood, but I'll spare you from the pain and leave it there for now. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you also created a spread of your own childhood, I'd love to see that, but no pressure. But yeah, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one. So stay wholesome, bitches.